Welcome to Mind Over Matter, where we uncover the tools to rise above life's hardest challenges. Today's guest is Shannon Petrovich, a therapist, coach, best selling author, and creator of the popular YouTube channel Therapist Talks Thrive Beyond Narcissism. With decades of experience helping people break free from toxic, narcissist, and abusive relationships, Shannon's work blends therapy, coaching, and real life wisdom. Together, we'll explore how to step out of destructive patterns and reclaim clarity, strength, and self worth. Welcome to the show, Shannon. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Anya. It's very much an honor to be here.
So, Shannon, you have helped countless people move through toxic relationships. What's the very first step for someone who feels trapped in one?
It's really important that we regroup and look at how we treat ourselves inside our own heads. We talk to ourselves something like 70,000 times a day. And if we are busy beating ourselves up internally, emotionally, then we are going to have a hard time setting boundaries with other people in every relationship in our lives. When I work with people, oftentimes they will find, oh my gosh, I placate and peacekeep in every single relationship, every friendship, every relationship. It's not just about my partner, sometimes with kids, with adult kids, with parents. So it's important that we look at how we treat ourselves and then how that sort of lets other people or it sets us up in relationships with other people who are not healthy for us.
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely. So, why is that first step often the hardest?
I think that mostly because we're not aware. Early in my 20s, I went to see a therapist, and she said, I want you to write down every single time you say something negative about yourself inside your head. And I thought that sounded pretty dumb. But once I started to do it, I realized it was happening constantly. And it was very much at the root and foundation of everything else that was going on in my life. And so once I started to become aware of that and then to really embrace who I am as a genuine person and not all the running down internal messages I had internalized, then I began to, just live a healthier life, take better care of myself emotionally, physically, socially, really in every way of my life. I think the awareness is hard. A lot of people have no awareness of that. And then when they become aware of it, they're really shocked. When I ask them, would you say those things to other people when they're struggling or even have made a mistake? They say, no, I would never talk to anybody that way. So what I do is I encourage them to become their own best friend. Like you wouldn't treat your best friend that way. So you need to treat yourself the way you actually treat other people. And when they start to treat themselves with that awareness, then it resonates out into the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that's so true. Leaving isn't just about walking away, it's about breaking free inside first.
Yeah, and leaving is really an important concept because, I wrote a book called Out of the Fog into the Clear, and that's an acronym I created. Clear is clarity, leaving emotionally and or physically, educating yourself using your awareness, and rebuilding is the R in clear. So all of those pieces are really, really important. And the leaving part is emotionally leaving. So once we're taking better care of ourselves internally, it's much easier for us to emotionally step back from other people's games and drama and recognize the myriad of games. I've done a lot of videos, and in my masterclass series and my coaching, I talk about the huge array of games. It's like a smorgasbord inside a toxic person's brain where they will first start with a little guilt trip and then sprinkle in a little drama and then add a microaggression and then go back to guilt and then go to anger and then go to tears. And, by sort of revolving in and out and all through these different games, it just throws you off and makes you feel like everything is your fault and you're doing something wrong. And if you would just get it right, then the relationship would be good again. So first we have to emotionally leave. We have to step back and look at all of those games as games, manipulative games that they're using to control you. And then you can recognize, okay, that's not about me. And when they're playing these games, it's for a reason. And I don't need to buy into them, try to fix them, try to placate them. And once we do that, emotionally leaving, we can decide whether we also need to physically leave.
Yeah, 100%. And your book talks about journaling as a healing tool. How does writing help someone process trauma from abusive dynamics?
So journaling is not everyone's cup of tea, I understand. And a lot of people will say, I don't want to journal. Like, all right, fine, whatever. But it actually is super helpful. It's a way we can dialogue with ourselves really honestly. Because when we're speaking to somebody, even a therapist, we're often guarded and trying to look good and look okay and just different things. We just have agendas inside our heads we're not even aware of. But journaling, if you really get down to brass tacks and really share it openly and honestly, you can learn a lot about how you function inside your own mind and heart and soul. And that is absolutely crucial to healing. We can't fix what we don't understand, and we can't understand it unless we take time. So, I encourage prayer and meditation of whatever journey you're on and journaling so that you can get to know what's going on inside of you, the toxic relationship you have that you have with yourself, but also the cognitive distortions that we all engage in when we catastrophize or when we minimize or deny or when we rationalize or when we um, you know these narratives in our heads that really aren't factual. So we have to really get to know ourselves on a deeper level in order to do all that healing. Otherwise, I find that people will bounce out of a toxic relationship and pretty soon they're back in another one. And it isn't, some people will say, oh, they're just comfortable in that. It's no, that's a horrible word to use. Toxic relationships are awful and nobody wants to be in one. But if you haven't done the healing internally and you still feel like garbage inside, then you are very much at risk for getting drawn into another toxic relationship. And that's why I've done videos that say, so you are free from the narcissist, but you still feel terrible. And that's why I started my coaching program, because a lot of people really have a hard time getting fully free and actually doing the healing process and moving past it so that they will not ever accept or get into or find themselves lost in another toxic relationship.
Yeah, that's amazing. And can you share an example of how journaling shifted someone's healing journey?
Sure. A lot of times somebody will sort of say, well, this, and this. And then I'll say, well, why don't you write about that? And then they'll come back next session and say, oh my gosh, I had no idea how negatively I was talking to myself. I had no idea how much I had allowed to happen in this relationship. One of the first journaling projects is to write all the facts of the relationship because we get so lost in the emotional trauma bond, which I'll swing back on in a minute, but that we get so lost in that trauma bond where they are pitching a little tantrum. And so we feel like, oh, we did that wrong. They get mad about this. So we want to change the way we speak to them or all of these manipulations. When you actually write out all the bad things that have happened in a relationship and you recognize, man, I would never say that to anybody, or I would never do that to anybody, or how did I let all these different things go thinking it was going to get better and it really hasn't been good in a really long time. So that helps with the clarity, which, like I said, was the first letter. That clarity, using our rational minds to write out what actually is going on rather than letting our emotional mind basically make our decisions in an irrational way. So a lot of people in our culture, and I did a video about this too, follow your heart is basically the worst thing you could tell somebody to do if they're in a toxic relationship, because unfortunately, our emotional mind and our even survival mind get trauma bonded to this person. And that's a very confusing thing. And that's why you'll hear somebody say, but I love him or I love her. And you have to say, well, actually, you are attached to that person. But if you think about what love is and what love isn't, love is patient, love is kind, it's not boastful, it's not adding up wrongs, it's not hurtful, it's not harmful. And when you look at the rational, look at your journal and you say, okay, that person has been hurtful, untrustworthy, mean, vengeful, spiteful, boastful, never about me, always about themselves, like never patient, never kind. You can see that's not love. So when we clarify again, that's that we need to use our rational mind to look at what is love and what is trauma bond, and then recognize it's going to be hard to release that trauma bond, but it's doable. But we have to keep, sort of like heroin, we can't keep getting high on that that relationship, allowing ourselves to be love bombed back in or manipulated back in. Spend the time away, spend the time with yourself so that, or in, coaching or in self-help group or meeting of some sort, or in my book or whatever source you get, to help yourself really recover and rebuild so that you are not easily drawn back into another toxic relationship, that you really sever that trauma bond so that you can get completely free.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Like, it shows how even a simple practice can bring immense clarity and empowerment.
Yeah, and I think that, it is a practice. It doesn't happen overnight. We have to practice self-care. We have to practice speaking to ourselves kindly and lovingly. We have to practice self-compassion and then look at all aspects of our lives, because if we're beat up at work, or if we're beat up from our kids or our best friend or our siblings or our parents or anybody, when we recognize all the different ways we're placating and peacekeeping and people pleasing, and how that undermines ourselves and undermines our thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs, we have to look at and clean up all aspects of our relationships so that we're not, um, our relationship should be where we rest and where we regroup and recuperate from the world, because the world's a lot right now, especially. And if those places are actually the most unsafe place in your life, you really have to step back and take a look at that.
Yeah, definitely. And narcissistic relationships often erode self worth. How can survivors begin rebuilding their sense of self aware after years of gaslighting or control?
Really good question, Anya. It's so difficult sometimes. People are so lost in the fog, and that's why I wrote the book about it. Because when you've been gaslit, love bombed, devalued, all the games narcissists play and other toxic people play, you do lose your sense of self. And when you've trauma bonded to somebody, really all of your time, attention, awareness, and emotional energy is going towards this sort of hypervigilance of noticing the other person's moods and emotions, trying to placate those moods and emotions, trying to fix everything around you so that everything is going fine, so they don't get upset. It's all encompassing, all engrossing, and it completely sucks the life out of you. If you feel exhausted by a relationship, that's not a healthy relationship. And typically people will become coming out of these relationships completely financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically bankrupt. They just feel absolutely rock bottom, done, just emotionally crashed. So recovering from this is serious business. Also, their sort of survival system has been on high alert, and they can feel agitated, anxious, depressed, So it's serious business. And so when people say, well, why doesn't she just get out or why doesn't he just leave her? That's really cruel. You have to recognize how serious this is and how, people are completely debilitated by it so often. So that healing process takes what it takes. It takes the time and it takes the energy and attention that it takes. It's like coming out of a war zone and having post traumatic stress disorder. And a lot of people would and do actually fit the diagnosis for PTSD coming out of a relationship like this, even if there was no physical abuse. And people don't understand that either. Like, oh, I don't know why I feel this badly. It's not like they ever hit me. Well, that isn't the point. It's being on that survival instinct, that agitated anxiety, and that devalued depression that destroys our sense of self, our mental health, our entire well-being. There's a whole lot of evidence about our physical well-being being tied to our mental well-being. When we are miserable like this, we're going to have physical issues come from it. So we can even become completely physically destroyed by it. So it's a very serious issue. And that's why I really focused my career on helping people with this and doing it in a lot of different ways so that, people all over the world, millions of people will never have access to therapy or coaching. And that's why I wrote a book and I made it extremely affordable so that people could do that. The YouTube channel obviously is free. And a lot of people do memberships and, charge for this. And I have kept most of my content totally free because I want people to understand how to heal and how to move on.
Yes, 100%. What role does community or support play in that rebuilding process?
I would hope that anybody listening who's not in a toxic relationship, but who knows somebody who is, would be compassionate and recognize how hard this is and not just get frustrated and write them off and say, well, they're never going to get free and they're never going to get it. So whatever, I'm not going to pay attention to that person anymore. Really compassionately, caringly support that person and recognize it's a process. It's very hard to disentangle, and recognize there are clear steps to healing and they're not obvious. The rest of the world is going to coach people in a lot of really terrible ways. And I'm sad to say that, but a lot of times people will say, just go no contact and you'll be fine. Well, that isn't even the start of being fine. Like I've been talking about, your entire system is a mess. Your emotions are a wreck and you're physically a wreck and you need healing, like you're coming out of a war zone. So, um, not brushing things off and not really, really genuinely listening so that if you are a community for somebody, or if you're in community with others and you're recovering, make sure that your community is supporting you in the ways that you need it to. And if somebody says something ridiculous, that you step back emotionally and look at it and say, okay, well, that doesn't apply to me because they don't understand. And if you haven't ever gone through this or gone through it with somebody that you care about, you wouldn't necessarily get it. And, like I said, the general world is not going to give you good advice. They're going to say, follow your heart, first of all. Well, that's going to lead you right back to that relationship. Then they're going to say, just get over it. Well, that doesn't help at all. So there are very, very specific steps to go through. And that's a critical piece. The last third of my book and the last third of my coaching program is all about rebuilding. Because if you are completely bankrupt, if you've been so focused on someone else's thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs for months or years, you have no idea what your own thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs even are anymore. So you have to spend time. You have to spend time practicing relaxation and calming down your entire survival system so that it's not constantly on screech. You have to find new people sometimes because your old people are connected with that person, or you never had people that were supportive and caring towards you. Then you have to find new people. So there's a lot to do, specific steps, and community is really critical. And I also talk about how to rebuild community if you have to. But if you are somebody else's community, make sure that you're supporting them in healthy, rational ways and not just knee jerk reactions.
Yes, that's powerful. It reminds us that we heal not just alone, but with safe people who mirror back our true.
Yes. And again, if you're a kind, caring person who is a good friend and loyal and honest, those are your character qualities. And that's who you truly are. Our world tells us that self-esteem is how many likes you got on a post on Instagram, or if you're having a good hair day, or if your makeup is perfect, or if you got a big fat bank account, or you got muscles, or whatever. Fill in the blank. None of that matters. None of that has anything to do with relationships. And when we step back and look at our character qualities that we actually like, love, respect about ourselves, then we have to connect ourselves to others who have those same character qualities and not just look for friends who are attractive or popular or whatever. Like we just have such a messed up sense of what matters in our world right now. And so we have to look at and then find those people who are going to be those healthy mirrors for us, and as we are to them. We have to look at all the relationships in our lives that are a one-way street and are not genuinely present for us, or occasionally devalue us, make us feel like garbage, or have little microaggressions that they use to keep us in line with what they want. I have to look at all that stuff because it just degrades us over time. But having that community is really critical, like you said.
Yes, totally. So, what a profound conversation with Shannon Petrovich. She's reminded us that toxic relationships don't define us, they invite us to rise, heal, and rediscover who we truly are. If today's dialogue touched you, take one small step towards self care, self trust, or self expression. Because the clearer we become inside, the stronger we stand outside.